So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. In the deepest folds of Nirn's ancient crust, where the air grows thin and the light of Magnus cannot reach, there lies a world untouched by the passing of seasons. Here, beneath the mountains of Resdayn, the stone remembers. The halls of the Dwemer, the deep elves, stretch endlessly through the earth, their arches and corridors carved with a precision that defies the reckoning of time. Every pillar, every gear and pipe, every silent automaton standing sentinel in the gloom, is a testament to a vanished people whose wisdom and pride once shaped the fate of Tamriel. It is said that even the wind, when it finds its way through the broken gates and shattered domes, carries with it the echoes of laughter and debate, of hammers striking metal and voices raised in song. Yet now, only silence reigns. It is a silence heavy with memory, as if the very stones mourn the loss of those who once called these halls home. In the heart of these ruins, where the darkness is deepest and the air shimmers with the faintest residue of ancient magics, the legend of the last king of the Dwemer takes root. His name, Dumac Dwarfking, is spoken only in whispers by those who remember, and by the machines that still patrol the endless corridors, their brass limbs creaking softly as they await commands that will never come. The story begins long before the cataclysm that would erase the Dwemer from the world, in an age when their cities were alive with purpose and invention. The great city of Nchardak, known as the Library of the Deep, housed scholars and artisans whose genius rivaled that of the gods. Steam rose in gentle plumes from the forges, and the halls rang with the music of tonal architects, their resonators shaping not only metal but reality itself. It was here, amid the humming machinery and the scent of oil and stone, that Dumac first learned the art of leadership. He was not born to a crown, nor did he seek it, but the people saw in him a rare blend of wisdom and strength. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, his words carried the weight of mountains. Under his guidance, the Dwemer flourished, their cities expanding ever deeper into the earth, their wonders growing more marvelous with each passing year. Yet for all their brilliance, the Dwemer were a people apart. They trusted only in their own reason, their own hands, and looked upon the gods of men and Mare with skepticism, if not outright disdain. Theirs was a faith in logic, in the power of the mind to unravel the secrets of the cosmos. Some say it was this very pride that doomed them, that in seeking to master the world, they forgot the humility that tempers ambition. But in those days, Dumac sought unity, not conquest. He saw the value in peace, and in the strength that comes from understanding one's neighbors. His friendship with Endoral Nerevar, the leader of the Chimer, was legendary, a bond forged in shared trials and mutual respect. Together, they dreamed of a land where Dwemer and Chimer might thrive side by side, their differences a source of strength rather than strife. The halls of the Dwemer rang with debate as often as with song. Dumac welcomed dissent, believing that only through challenge and discourse could the truth be revealed. His counselors came from every corner of the kingdom, each bringing their own wisdom and perspective. Some urged caution, wary of the Chimer's fiery tempers and devotion to their Daedric patrons. Others saw opportunity in alliance, in the exchange of knowledge and the promise of peace. It was a time of hope, but also of tension. Beneath the surface, old wounds festered, and not all were content with Dumac's vision. There were those who whispered of betrayal, who saw in the Chimer only potential enemies, and in Dumac's friendship with Nerevar a dangerous naivety. Yet the king held fast to his ideals, trusting in the strength of his people and the wisdom of his own heart. In the deepest chambers of Nchardak, Dumac would often walk alone, his footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. He would pause before the great machines, their gears turning in endless, silent cycles, and ponder the mysteries of the world. What was the purpose of power, he wondered, if not to protect and uplift? What did it mean to be a king, if not to serve? The stone itself seemed to answer, its silent presence a reminder of the ages that had come before and the ages yet to come. Dumac knew that his people stood at a crossroads, that the choices he made would shape not only the fate of the Dwemer, but the destiny of all Tamriel. And so, in the stillness beneath stone and silence, the story of the last king of the Dwemer begins, not with a shout, but with a whisper carried on the breath of ancient halls, waiting to be heard by those who still remember. In the age when Resdayn was still young, before its mountains bore the scars of cataclysm and its valleys echoed with the silence of loss, the land thrummed with the pulse of two great peoples. Above, the Chimer built their citadels of ash and glass, their banners fluttering in the wind, their voices raised in worship to gods both terrible and beautiful. But beneath the surface, hidden from the sun's jealous gaze, the Dwemer carved out a kingdom of stone and brass, a world apart, yet intertwined with the fate of the land above. The Dwemer halls were unlike anything seen on the surface. Their cities were not merely built, but grown from the living rock, shaped by tonal architects who coaxed the stone to their will with song and science. Pillars rose like the trunks of ancient trees, supporting domes that shimmered with the glow of arcane lamps. Water flowed in carefully tended channels, powering machines that whispered and hummed in the darkness. Every wall was etched with the story of their people, mathematical proofs and philosophical treatises, rendered in the elegant script of the deep folk. At the heart of this subterranean empire stood the throne of Dumac Dwarfking. It was not a seat of gold or jewels, but a marvel of Dwemer craft, an intricate lattice of gears and levers, adorned with panels of polished brass and inlaid with runes that glowed softly in the glow. From this throne, Dumac ruled not with an iron fist, but with the steady hand of a master builder. His word was law, but his wisdom was sought as much as his command. Dumac's court was a place of constant motion and debate. Counselors from every corner of the kingdom brought news and petitions, their voices echoing off the stone. Artisans displayed their latest inventions, automatons that danced and sang, engines that could lift mountains, lenses that revealed the hidden patterns of the stars. Scholars argued over the nature of reality, their discussions punctuated by the gentle chime of tonal resonators. Even the lowest apprentice could speak their mind, for Dumac believed that truth could come from any quarter. Yet for all its splendor, the Dwemer kingdom was not without its shadows. The deep folk were a people of logic and skepticism, their faith placed in the power of reason rather than the whims of gods. They looked upon the surface races with a mixture of curiosity and disdain, their hearts guarded by centuries of isolation. The Chimer, with their fiery tempers and fervent devotion, were both neighbors and rivals, sometimes friends, sometimes foes. Dumac, however, saw beyond old grudges. He understood that the future of his people was bound to the fate of Resdayn itself. His friendship with Endoral Nerevar, the great leader of the Chimer, was a beacon of hope in a world too often divided by fear. Together, they forged the pact of stone and ash, a fragile peace built on trust and mutual respect. Trade flourished, and the wonders of the Dwemer found their way into Chimer hands. Tools that never dulled, lamps that burned without fuel, music boxes that played the songs of the stars. The gilded thrones of Resdayn were not merely seats of power, but symbols of a dream, a vision of unity in a land scarred by ancient wounds. Dumac and Nerevar would meet beneath the mountain, their voices low and earnest, speaking of a future where their peoples might stand together against the darkness that threatened from beyond. They shared stories and laughter, and sometimes, in the quiet moments, they shared their doubts. For even in times of peace, the weight of the crown was heavy. Dumac felt it in the quiet hours, when the halls grew still and the only sound was the distant ticking of machines. He wondered if his people would ever truly accept the Chimer as equals, or if old hatreds would one day rise again to sunder what he and Nerevar had built. He pondered the mysteries of the Heart of Lorkhan, whispered of in ancient texts a power that could reshape the world, or destroy it utterly. Still, Dumac pressed on. He led by example, walking among his people, listening to their hopes and fears. He encouraged invention and debate, knowing that the strength of the Dwemer lay not in their machines, but in their minds. He reminded his counselors that wisdom was found as often in humility as in pride, and that the greatest achievements were those that served not just the few, but all. And so, beneath the mountains of Resdayn, the Dwemer thrived. Their halls rang with laughter and song, their forges glowed with the promise of new wonders. The gilded thrones of Dumac and Nerevar stood as a testament to what could be achieved when vision overcame division, when the courage to trust outweighed the comfort of suspicion. But even as the deep folk celebrated their golden age, the seeds of doubt and discord took root. For every voice raised in hope, another whispered of danger, of secrets best left buried, of powers that should not be touched. The throne of Dumac, for all its brilliance, cast a long shadow. And in that shadow, the fate of the Dwemer and of all Resdayn would be decided. In the shadowed valleys and beneath the soaring peaks of Resdayn, a land both beautiful and perilous, two peoples shaped the fate of the world. Above, the Chimer, golden-skinned, proud, and passionate, built their temples and strongholds, their voices rising in songs to gods who walked among them. Below, the Dwemer, secretive, brilliant, and skeptical, wove their cities of brass and stone, their halls echoing with the hum of machines and the measured cadence of reasoned debate. For centuries, the two races eyed one another across the divide, suspicion and envy simmering beneath the surface, each certain of the rightness of their own path. Yet, as the years passed and the world shifted, there came a moment when the old hostility softened. It began not with grand proclamations or mighty battles, but with quiet conversations in the twilight, when the burdens of leadership weighed heavy on two visionaries, Dumac Dwarfking of the Dwemer and Endoral Nerevar of the Chimer. Each saw in the other a kindred spirit, a leader shaped by hardship, tempered by wisdom, and possessed of a restless curiosity about the world and its mysteries. The first meeting was arranged in secrecy, deep within the shadow of Red Mountain. There, in a cavern lit by the soft glow of luminous fungi and the distant rumble of magma, Dumac and Nerevar spoke as equals. They shared tales of their people's triumphs and tragedies, of the dreams that drove them and the fears that haunted their nights. Dumac spoke of the Dwemer's pursuit of knowledge, their relentless drive to understand the hidden workings of Mundus. Nerevar spoke of the Chimer's devotion to their ancestors and their gods, their longing for purpose and transcendence. There was, at first, little common ground. The Dwemer, after all, scorned the worship of gods, placing their faith in logic and invention. The Chimer, by contrast, revered the Daedra in the tribunal, seeking guidance in visions and prophecy. Yet, as the hours passed and the fire flickered low, the two leaders found themselves drawn together by a shared conviction that their peoples, for all their differences, were stronger united than divided. This was born the pact of stone and ash, a fragile alliance, built not on conquest or submission, but on mutual respect and a recognition of shared destiny. The pact was sealed not with blood or ritual, but with a simple gesture. Dumac offered Nerevar a ring of Dwemer make, its surface etched with runes of friendship and trust. Nerevar, in turn, presented Dumac with a blade forged in the fires of Vivek, its edge keen and true. These tokens, exchanged in the darkness beneath Red Mountain, became symbols of a new era. In the months that followed, the pact was tested again and again. There were those among the Chimer who whispered that the Dwemer could not be trusted, that their machines and their skepticism were an affront to the gods. Among the Dwemer, too, there were voices of dissent, engineers and scholars who feared that alliance with the Chimer would bring only trouble, that the passions of the surface dwellers would disrupt the delicate balance of their subterranean world. But Dumac and Nerevar persevered. They convened councils in the great halls of Nchardak and the sunlit courtyards of Al-Dirun, inviting representatives from both peoples to speak their minds and air their grievances. There were heated arguments, to be sure, and more than one council ended in frustration and anger. Yet, slowly, trust began to grow. Trade flourished as Dwemer artisans shared their wonders, unbreakable tools, self-mending armor, lamps that burned with the light of captured stars, and Chimer farmers offered rare herbs, spices, and the wisdom of the Ashlands. Joint expeditions were launched to explore the mysteries of Red Mountain. Chimer mages and Dwemer engineers worked side by side, deciphering ancient runes and delving into forgotten tombs. In time, friendships blossomed between individuals, even as old prejudices lingered in the shadows. Children of both races played together in the border villages, their laughter echoing across the fields, while elders watched with wary hope. The pact was not without its challenges. There were raids from the north, as Nords swept down from Skyrim, their war cries chilling the blood of even the bravest warriors. There were disputes over land and resources, as the ever-shifting ash storms of Vardenfell reshaped the borders between Chimer and Dwemer holdings. And always, there was the looming presence of Red Mountain itself, a reminder of the power and danger that lay beneath the surface, waiting to be awakened. Yet, through it all, Dumac and Nerevar remained steadfast. They met often, sometimes in secret, sometimes before their assembled councils, to reaffirm their commitment to the pact. They spoke of a future where Dwemer ingenuity and Chimer spirit might together create wonders undreamed of by either race alone. They dreamed of a land where stone and ash, reason and faith, might coexist in harmony. The pact of stone and ash became more than a treaty, it became a symbol of hope. Psalms were sung in the halls of both peoples, telling of the day when Dumac and Nerevar clasped hands beneath the mountain and swore to shape the future together. Poets spoke of the ring and the blade, of the promise that bound two worlds. Even the gods, it was whispered, looked on with approval, or perhaps with envy. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. There were secrets that neither side was willing to share, mysteries too dangerous or sacred to be entrusted to outsiders. The Dwemer guarded the knowledge of their tonal architecture and the true nature of their great machines. The Chimer kept the rights of their ancestors and the prophecies of the tribunal close to their hearts. There were moments when trust faltered, when suspicion threatened to unravel all that had been built. Still, the pact endured. For every voice raised in anger, another spoke in defense of unity. For every setback, there was a triumph, a new invention, a successful harvest, a festival where Chimer and Dwemer danced together beneath the stars. The memory of old wars faded, replaced by the promise of a shared future. And so, the pact of stone and ash became the foundation upon which a new Resdayn was built. It was a fragile thing, easily broken, yet stronger than any wall of stone or shield of brass. It was a testament to the power of vision, of courage, of the willingness to reach across the divide and grasp the hand of a former enemy. In the years to come, the pact would be tested as never before. But for a time, at least, the dream endured. Beneath the shadow of Red Mountain, stone and ash stood together, and the world was changed forever. Beneath the restless slopes of Red Mountain, where the earth's blood runs hot and the air shimmers with the memory of ancient fires, the Dwemer delved deeper than any before them. Here, in the lightless caverns and labyrinthine halls, their greatest secret lay hidden. A secret that would shape the destiny of Resdayn and echo through the ages, the Heart of Lorkhan. It began as a whisper, a rumor passed between scholars and tonal architects, spoken only in the hush of Camelot workshops and the shadowed corners of council chambers. The heart, they said, was no mere relic, but the divine spark torn from the very God who had shaped the world. It pulsed with unimaginable power, a fragment of creation itself, buried deep within the mountain's molten core. Some believed it was a myth, a metaphor for the Dwemer's ceaseless quest for knowledge. Others, those who had glimpsed the forbidden texts and deciphered the oldest runes, knew the truth. The heart was real, and it called to those with the wisdom and the audacity to seek it. Kagranak, the high engineer, was foremost among these seekers. His mind was a forge of invention, his ambition matched only by his genius. He saw in the heart not only a source of power, but a key to the greatest mystery of all, the nature of divinity. What was a god, if not a being who understood the secret music of the world? What separated mortal from immortal, flesh from spirit, if not the knowledge to shape reality itself? Kagrenac believed the heart could answer these questions, and perhaps even grant the Dwemer mastery over their own fate. King Dumac, wise and cautious, listened to Kagrenac's counsel with a heavy heart. He understood the promise of the heart, the allure of its power, but he also sensed the danger that lurked beneath its surface. The Dwemer had always walked a narrow path, balancing their thirst for understanding against the perils of hubris. Dumac knew that some doors, once opened, could never be closed. Yet, he also knew that to deny the curiosity of his people was to deny their very nature. And so, with great reluctance, he sanctioned the project that would become the defining endeavor of his reign. The work proceeded in secret, hidden from the eyes of the Chimer and even from many within the Dwemer's own ranks. Deep within the mountain, Kagrenac and his chosen disciples constructed vast machines, engines of brass and crystal, powered by the harmonies of tonal architecture. They mapped the flows of magma and the patterns of seismic energy, searching for the precise location where the heart lay buried. Months turned to years, and the project consumed ever more resources, ever more minds. As the machines grew, so too did the tension within the kingdom. Some Dwemer questioned the wisdom of meddling with forces they barely understood. Rumors spread of strange accidents, of workers driven mad by visions of fire and darkness. The council chambers rang with heated debate as scholars and artisans argued over the ethics of the project. Was the pursuit of knowledge worth any price? Could the Dwemer truly hope to master the heart, or would it master them? Dumac, ever the mediator, sought to balance the competing voices. He convened councils, listened to the fears of his people, and urged Kagrenac to proceed with caution. Yet, he could not deny the excitement that flickered in his own heart, the hope that the heart might unlock a new golden age for the Dwemer, a future free from the petty squabbles and jealousies of the surface races. Meanwhile, whispers of the project reached the ears of the Chimer. Nerevar, Dumac's friend and ally, confronted the king in a rare moment of anger. He spoke of prophecy and doom, of visions granted by the Daedra and warnings whispered in dreams. The heart, he said, was not meant for mortal hands. Its power would bring only ruin. Dumac, torn between loyalty to his friend and duty to his people, promised caution, but the seeds of mistrust had been sown. Within the depths, Kagrenac's work neared completion. The great machines hummed with energy, their resonators tuned to the secret frequencies of the world. At last, after countless trials, the heart was revealed, a pulsing, radiant stone, suspended in a chamber of living rock. Its light bathed the engineers in a glow that was both beautiful and terrible, filling them with awe and dread in equal measure. Kagrenac believed he had found the key to transcendence. With his tools, the keening, the sunder, and the wraithguard, he sought to bind the heart's power, to channel its energy into the Dwemer themselves. He spoke of a new era, when his people would become as gods, free from the shackles of mortality. Some believed him, their eyes shining with hope. Others recoiled in fear, sensing that the line between creation and destruction had grown perilously thin. Dumac watched as his kingdom stood on the brink of transformation. He saw the hope in his people's faces, but also the shadows that gathered at the edges of their dreams. He wondered if the price of greatness was too high, if the pursuit of the heart would cost the Dwemer their very souls. In the end, the secret of the heart was not merely a question of power, but of purpose. What did it mean to be mortal? To strive, to fail, to hope, and to fear? The Dwemer, in their quest to master the heart, were forced to confront the deepest truths of their existence. And so, beneath the mountain's unyielding stone, the fate of the Dwemer was sealed, not by the heart itself, but by the choices they made in its shadow. The secret of the heart was not merely a relic of the past, but a mirror held up to the soul of a people, reflecting their greatest hopes and their darkest fears. Within the echoing halls of Nchardak, where the golden light of 1,000 lamps flickered across polished brass and ancient stone, the council of the Dwemer gathered. Their voices, once harmonious, now carried an undercurrent of unease, a subtle discord that crept into every debate and lingered in the silent moments between words. The council chamber itself, a marvel of Dwemer ingenuity, seemed to sense the tension. Gears turned more slowly. The great clock at the chamber's heart ticked with a hesitant rhythm, and the air was charged with the weight of unspoken fears. King Dumac sat upon his intricate throne, his eyes shadowed with worry. He listened as his advisors, engineers, tonal architects, philosophers, and generals debated the future of their people. The Heart of Lorkhan, recently uncovered beneath the molten roots of Red Mountain, had become the axis upon which all their hopes and anxieties spun. Some saw in it the promise of transcendence, a means to free the Dwemer from the cycles of mortality and suffering. Others saw only peril, the specter of hubris that had toppled empires and gods alike. Kagrenak, the High Engineer, stood at the center of the storm. His brilliance was unquestioned, his vision dazzling. He spoke of the heart as a tool, an engine of possibility, a puzzle to be solved. With his tonal tools, he claimed, the Dwemer could reshape themselves, become masters of their own fate. His words sparked wonder in some, dread in others. For every counselor who dreamed of godhood, another whispered of disaster. The council fractured along old lines and new. The scholars of Tardams, ever cautious, counseled restraint. They recalled the tales of the Edra and Deidra, of mortals who reached too far and fell into ruin. "We are not gods," intoned one elder, his beard streaked with silver. "We are builders. Let us not mistake our craft for divinity." The artisans of Nchardak, inspired by Kagrenak's vision, argued for boldness. "If we do not seize this moment," they urged, "we will forever be bound by the limits of flesh and time. The heart is our inheritance, our destiny." Amid these voices, Dumac sought balance. He remembered the lessons of the past, the wars with the Chimer, the fragile peace of the pact of stone and ash. He knew that power, unchecked, could tear his people apart. Yet he also saw the hunger in their eyes, the longing for something greater. He called for patience, for study and debate, hoping to slow the rush toward the unknown. But shadows moved in the council's corners. Some whispered that Dumac was growing weak, that his friendship with Nerevar clouded his judgment. They questioned his willingness to share power with the Chimer, to trust in alliances rather than in the strength of the Dwemer alone. Others whispered of Kagrenak's ambition, fearing that the High Engineer's reach exceeded his grasp. Quiet meetings were held in the depths of the city, far from the king's ears. Alliances formed and dissolved in the flicker of a lamp. The tension bled into daily life. Artisans muttered as they worked, their hands less steady than before. Scholars argued late into the night, their voices rising in frustration. Even the automatons, those tireless servants of brass and steam, seemed to move with less certainty, as if sensing the unease of their creators. The city's great machines, once symbols of unity and purpose, now stood as silent witnesses to a people divided. Dumac felt the weight of every decision. He walked the halls at night, listening to the distant hum of machinery, searching for answers in the patterns of light and shadow. He met with Kagrenak in secret, pressing him for assurances, for some sign that the heart could be controlled. Kagrenak, ever confident, spoke of equations and harmonics, of safety measures and fail-safes. But even he could not hide the glint of obsession in his eyes. Outside the council, rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed that the heart had already changed those who worked closest to it, that their dreams were haunted by visions of fire and emptiness. Others whispered that the Chimer watched with growing suspicion, that Nerevar himself had sent spies into the depths to learn the Dwemer's secrets. Old prejudices resurfaced, stoked by fear and uncertainty. In the end, it was not a single voice or action that tipped the balance, but the slow accumulation of doubt. The council, once united in purpose, became a battleground of ideas and ambitions. Each member, in their own way, wrestled with the same question. What price were they willing to pay for knowledge? For power? For the chance to shape the future? Dumac, caught between loyalty and duty, between friendship and fear, could only watch as the shadows deepened. He knew that the choices made in those echoing halls would shape not only the fate of the Dwemer, but the destiny of all Resdayn. And as the council fractured, the first cracks appeared in the foundation of a kingdom that had once seemed unbreakable. Yet even as doubt and discord threatened to tear them apart, the Dwemer pressed on. For theirs was a people who had always sought answers in the darkness, who had always dared to dream beyond the limits of the world they knew. And so, beneath the flickering lamps and the turning gears, the council's debates continued. Each word, each silence, a step closer to the moment when hope and fear would collide, and the fate of the Dwemer would be decided. The air beneath Red Mountain grew heavy, charged with the scent of ash and a distant, ever-present thrum of magma pulsing through the earth's veins. In the halls of the Dwemer, the tension was nearly tangible, a subtle vibration in the stone, a hush that fell over even the busiest forges and most crowded council chambers. The pact of stone and ash, once a beacon of hope, now flickered uncertainly, its light threatened by the gathering storm of suspicion, pride, and fear. The first signs were small, almost imperceptible: a missed council meeting, a message delivered late, a wary glance exchanged between old allies. Yet these ripples soon deepened into currents that swept through the hearts of both Dwemer and Chimer. For all their shared dreams, the differences between the two peoples had never truly faded. The Chimer, with their devotion to living gods and the unpredictable passions of their Daedric patrons, watched the Dwemer's secretive machinations with mounting unease. The Dwemer, in turn, grew impatient with what they saw as superstition and interference, their faith in logic and invention hardening into a kind of isolation. King Dumac felt the change keenly. He walked the corridors of Nchardak and Tardams, pausing to speak with artisans and scholars, listening for the pulse of his people. He heard the worry in their voices, the uncertainty that crept into conversations once filled with excitement. The Heart of Lorkhan, that mysterious and powerful relic, had become a wedge driven between friends and allies. Rumors abounded that the Chimer plotted to seize the heart for themselves, that the Dwemer's experiments threatened to unleash forces beyond mortal control, that the fragile piece was nothing more than a mask for deeper, older rivalries. In the Chimer cities, too, unease grew. Nerevar, Dumac's friend and counterpart, found himself beset by advisors who warned of Dwemer treachery. Visions and omens, interpreted by the wise women and priests, spoke of disaster, of a mountain wreathed in fire, of a people consumed by their own ambition. The tribunal, newly ascendant and eager to secure their own power, whispered that the Dwemer's pride would doom them all. Nerevar, torn between loyalty to Dumac and duty to his people, struggled to hold the peace, but the storm clouds gathered all the same. As the seasons turned, the signs of impending conflict multiplied. Trade between the two peoples slowed, then faltered. Joint expeditions to Red Mountain ended in arguments and accusations. Messengers returned with tales of border skirmishes, nothing large, nothing official, but enough to stoke old fears. In the depths of Dwemer strongholds, Kagranak pressed on with his work, his machines growing ever more complex, ever more secret. Some whispered that he no longer sought Dumac's counsel, that the High Engineer's ambition now outstripped even the king's authority. Dumac called council after council, seeking to calm the rising tide. He spoke of unity, of reason, of the promise that had once bound Dwemer and Chimer together. Yet each meeting seemed only to deepen the divisions as voices grew louder and tempers shorter. The heart loomed over every discussion, its power both a promise and a threat. Some argued for caution, others for boldness. Some urged alliance, others demanded war. In the quiet hours of the night, Dumac would retreat to the highest tower of his city, gazing out over the land he had sworn to protect. He saw the fires of Chimer's settlements burning on the horizon, the distant gleam of Dwemer forges, the shadow of Red Mountain rising between them. He wondered if there was still time to avert disaster, or if the storm had already broken. And in the depths of the earth, the heart pulsed on, its secret music growing louder, echoing through the dreams of those who dared to listen. It sang of power and possibility, of worlds remade and destinies rewritten. But it also sang of pride, of division, of the storm that now gathered above and below. The peace that Dumac and Nerevar had built, stone by stone and ash by ash, trembled on the edge of ruin. As the first lightning flashed across the sky and the winds began to howl, the fate of two peoples, and the future of all Resdayn, hung in the balance, waiting for the storm to break. The world above and below Resdayn seemed to hold its breath as the long-expected storm finally broke. For years, suspicion and pride had festered between the Dwemer and the Chimer, each people clinging to the memory of ancient wounds and the hope of a future shaped by their own vision. The fragile peace forged by Dumac and Nerevar now trembled on the edge of a blade, and the mountain that had watched their alliance blossom now loomed as the stage for its unmaking. It began not with a declaration, but with a series of small, irrevocable steps. Patrols along the borderlands grew tense and frequent, each side convinced the other was preparing for betrayal. In the villages at the foot of Red Mountain, Chimer farmers whispered of Dwemer spies, while deep within the stone halls, Dwemer artisans muttered of Chimer saboteurs. The air was thick with rumors, each one more dire than the last, and the old psalms of unity faded beneath a chorus of marching boots and clashing shields. Within the halls of Nchardak, Dumac gathered his most trusted advisors. The council chamber, once a place of spirited debate and invention, now echoed with the weight of grim necessity. Maps were unrolled across the great stone table, marked with the routes of supply lines and the positions of strongholds. Generals spoke in measured tones, their faces set and pale. The king listened to each voice, his own heart heavy with the knowledge that every decision would carry the cost of lives and the burden of history. Dumac's gaze lingered on the image of Red Mountain, its peak wreathed in perpetual smoke. He remembered the days when he and Nerevar had stood together on those slopes, speaking of peace and the promise of a new age. Now, those memories seemed as fragile as the ash that drifted down from the mountain's flanks, easily scattered by the winds of war. The Chimer, too, prepared for conflict. Nerevar moved among his people, his words calm but resolute. He spoke of the need to defend their way of life, to protect the sacred lands from those who would defile them with forbidden magics. The tribunal stood at his side, their presence both a comfort and a reminder of the power that now shaped Chimer society. Soldiers gathered in the shadow of the great temples, their armor gleaming in the dawn light, their faces set with determination and sorrow. As the days passed, the armies of both peoples began their march. The sound of Dwemer automatons echoed through the deep places, their brass limbs gleaming as they prepared for battle. Chimer war bands moved with silent purpose through the ashlands, their banners snapping in the wind, their eyes fixed on the distant peak. The land itself seemed to mourn, the once busy trade roads now scarred by the passage of armored columns and the tread of countless feet. For Dumac, each step toward Red Mountain was a step away from the dream he had cherished. He moved among his soldiers, offering words of encouragement and quiet strength. He remembered the faces of those who had once called the Chimer friends and wondered how many would survive the coming storm. In the quiet moments, he found himself haunted by memories of laughter shared with Nerevar, of plans made for a future that now seemed lost beyond recall. The march was slow and arduous. The slopes of Red Mountain were treacherous, the air thin and choked with ash. Supply lines stretched thin, and the threat of ambush was ever present. Yet both armies pressed on, driven by duty, pride, and the knowledge that the fate of their peoples would be decided on those blasted heights. As the two forces drew closer, the land itself seemed to shudder. The ground trembled with the passage of heavy machines, and the sky was stained with the smoke of countless campfires. Scouts reported skirmishes along the flanks, each encounter leaving behind the scars of fear and anger. The songs of the Chimer grew grim and mournful, While the Dwemer worked in silence, their faces set against the coming storm. On the eve of battle, Dumac stood alone on a ridge overlooking the valley. The lights of both camps flickered in the darkness, each a fragile spark against the vastness of the night. He thought of the Heart of Lorkhan, pulsing deep within the mountain, and wondered if any wisdom could be found in its depths. He wondered if, even now, peace might be reclaimed, or if the march to Red Mountain was the final act in a tragedy begun long ago. As dawn broke, the armies assembled beneath the shadow of the mountain. The air was thick with anticipation, every soldier aware that the world would be changed by what was to come. Dumac donned his armor, the brass plates gleaming in the morning light, and took up the crown of his people. He moved among his generals, offering a steady hand and a quiet word, his own doubts hidden behind the mask of command. The Chimer stood ready, their ranks drawn up in solemn silence. Nerevar rode at their head, his eyes fixed on the mountain's peak, his heart heavy with the knowledge of what must be done. The tribunal offered blessings and prayers, their voices rising above the hush of the assembled host. And so, beneath the smoke-wreathed summit of Red Mountain, the armies of Dwemer and Chimer faced one another. The ground trembled with the weight of history, and the sky was dark with the promise of fire. The march was over. The final reckoning had come. In the shadow of Red Mountain, the air was thick with the scent of ash and the distant, thunderous rumble of the earth's unrest. The armies of the Dwemer and Chimer had drawn close, their camps glimmering like rival constellations on the scorched slopes. Yet, before swords could be drawn and destinies shattered, there remained one final hope. A council called in secret, away from the watchful eyes of generals and gods. Dumac Dwarfking, burdened by the weight of his crown and the sorrow of a friendship unraveling, summoned his most trusted advisors to a chamber deep within the heart of his fortress. The walls, lined with intricate brasswork and softly glowing runes, had witnessed centuries of debate and invention. Now, they braced themselves for words that might decide the fate of all Resdayn. Nerevar came, as Dumac had hoped he would. The Chimer lord entered with quiet dignity, his armor dusted by the mountain's ash, his eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. With him came the tribunal, Vivek, Sothasil, and Almalexia, each bearing the inscrutable calm of those who have glimpsed the future and found it wanting. The air between the two leaders was taut, heavy with memory and regret. They spoke first of what had been lost. Dumac recalled the early days of their alliance, when hope had seemed as endless as the tunnels beneath the earth. He spoke of laughter shared over plans for a united Resdayn, of the marvels their peoples had built together. Nerevar listened, his silence a mirror for Dumac's grief, and when he spoke, it was with the voice of a man who had loved and lost much. He spoke of the Chimer's fears, of the Heart of Lorkhan, of Kagranak's machines, of the price of ambition. Around them, the counselors argued. Some Dwemer, emboldened by Kagranak's promises, urged Dumac to seize the heart's power and trust in their own genius. Others pleaded for restraint, their voices trembling with the memory of old tales, of mortals who had reached too far and paid dearly. The Chimer, too, were divided. Vivek's words were poetry and warning, Almalexia's were edged with sorrow, and Sothasil's were as enigmatic as the workings of his own mind. Dumac turned to Nerevar, searching his friend's face for some trace of the trust that had once bound them. He offered compromise, a promise to slow the experiments, to share more openly the knowledge of the heart. Nerevar hesitated, torn between loyalty and the growing conviction that the Dwemer's path led only to ruin. The tribunal pressed him, their own ambitions and fears shaping their counsel. The debate stretched long into the night, the chamber lit only by the soft glow of Dwemer lamps and the distant, angry pulse of the heart deep within the mountain. Voices rose and fell, hope flickered and dimmed. At times, it seemed as if peace might yet be salvaged, that the old friendship could be reforged in the crucible of crisis. But always, the shadow of the heart loomed, its promise and peril dividing every word. In the end, no agreement could be reached. The wounds were too deep, the fears too great. Dumac and Nerevar parted in sorrow, each carrying the weight of a world teetering on the brink. The counselors filed out in silence, their faces pale and drawn, knowing that the last chance for peace had slipped through their fingers like ash on the wind. As Dumac stood alone in the empty chamber, he felt the full measure of his loss. The machines that lined the walls hummed softly, oblivious to the fate they had helped set in motion. Outside, the armies waited, the mountain brooded, and the heart pulsed on, its secret music now the dirge of a dream undone. And so, the last council ended, not with shouts or the clash of arms, but with the quiet breaking of something precious and rare. The world would remember the battles to come, the fire and fury of Red Mountain. But in the stillness of that chamber, the true tragedy had already unfolded, the end of trust and the beginning of the end for the Dwemer and the Chimer alike. At last, the dawn broke over Red Mountain, painting the ash-choked sky with a sullen, blood-red glow. The world seemed to hold its breath as the armies of the Dwemer and Chimer assembled on the blackened slopes, each host a mirror of the other in resolve and sorrow. For all their differences, both peoples moved with the solemnity of those who knew history's gaze was upon them. The ground trembled beneath the weight of their armor and the tread of brass-shod automatons, and the air shimmered with the tension of spells not yet cast. The Dwemer, resplendent in their burnished plate, advanced in ordered ranks. Their formations were precise, their discipline unyielding. Behind the shield wall marched the construct of Cadranac's genius, centurions of gleaming metal, spider-like spheres that scuttled with eerie purpose, and towering guardians whose eyes glowed with the cold light of tonal magic. Each machine was a testament to the deep folks' mastery of craft and their faith and reason over superstition. The air thrummed with the low, resonant hum of tonal resonators, the secret language of the Dwemer's art. Across the field, the Chimer gathered in loose, fluid bands, their golden skin streaked with ash and war paint. Their banners, emblazoned with the sigils of their clans and the symbols of their gods, snapped in the sulphurous wind. Warriors stood shoulder to shoulder with mages, their voices raised in chants that called upon the Daedra and the Tribunal for strength and guidance. The Tribunal themselves, Vivek, Sotasil, and Almalexia, moved among their people, their presence a living benediction, their words a balm against fear. Between the two hosts, the land bore the scars of ancient strife. Rivers of cooled lava snaked through the ash fields, and the bones of forgotten battles jutted from the earth like the fingers of the dead. The mountain itself seemed to pulse with anticipation, its slopes alive with the memory of creation and the promise of destruction. The first clash came not with a trumpet's call, but with a sudden, shattering silence. For a heartbeat, all was still, the armies poised on the edge of destiny, the world balanced between hope and ruin. Then, with a roar like the breaking of the world, the line surged forward. The Dwemer advanced behind a wall of shields, their automatons leading the charge. The ground shook as centurions crashed into the Chimer front, steam hissing from their joints, axes and hammers swinging in precise arcs. Chimer warriors met them with spear and spell, their blades flashing in the dim light, their voices raised in defiant song. Lightning crackled from the fingertips of sorcerers, shattering the armor of machines, while Dwemer engineers countered with blasts of sound and bursts of searing light. The battle raged up and down the slopes, a tide of violence that ebbed and flowed with the fortunes of war. In the chaos, old friends found themselves face to face as enemies. Dumac, clad in the finest armor his people could forge, led from the front, his voice carrying above the din, rallying his soldiers with words of courage and unity. Nerevar, his heart heavy with regret, fought with the fury of one who knows the cost of every life lost. Their eyes met across the battlefield, a moment of recognition and sorrow before duty swept them apart once more. Amid the tumult, Cadranach and his disciples pressed toward the heart of the mountain. Their goal was not conquest, but the final completion of their great work. They moved through the chaos like shadows, protected by automatons and the desperate hope that the Heart of Lorkhan might yet deliver their people from the jaws of fate. The Chimer sensed their purpose and redoubled their efforts, seeking to break through the Dwemer lines and halt the ritual they feared above all. The sky darkened as the mountain's fury grew. Ash rained down upon the living and the dead alike, obscuring friend and foe, turning the day to twilight. Fires sprang up where spells struck dry brush, and the screams of the wounded mingled with the clash of metal and the grinding of gears. The very earth trembled, as if mourning the folly of those who fought upon its back. Through it all, Dumac searched for Nerevar, hoping against hope for a chance to speak, to find some last spark of the friendship that had once bound them. But the battle swept them apart, and the mountain's voice drowned out all words of peace. As the sun set behind a veil of smoke, the outcome remained uncertain. Both armies had suffered grievous losses, and the ground was littered with the fallen, Dwemer and Chimer, machine and mare, all equal in death. Yet still they fought, driven by pride, by fear, and by the memory of a world that might have been. And in the depths of Red Mountain, the heart pulsed on, its secret power growing ever stronger, its song rising above the din of battle, a promise and a warning echoing through the ages. The battle's roar faded into a tense, unnatural quiet as the sun dipped behind Red Mountain's smoldering crown. The world seemed to shrink to the jagged rim of the caldera, where the fate of two peoples, Dwemer and Chimer, would be decided not by armies, but by the choices of a few. The summit was a place of ancient power, where the stone itself pulsed with the memory of creation and the air shimmered with the restless energy of the Heart of Lorkhan, beating deep within the mountain's fiery core. Dumac Dwarfking ascended the ashen slope, his armor scorched and battered, his heart leaden with grief and determination. He moved with the weight of history on his shoulders, each step a silent prayer for peace that seemed more distant with every heartbeat. The clangor of battle echoed far below, but here, at the world's edge, only the wind and the mountain's slow, seismic breath bore witness. At the summit, Nerevar awaited him. The Chimer Lord stood alone, his blade sheathed but his posture tense, the lines of exhaustion and sorrow etched deep into his golden features. The tribunal lingered in the shadows behind him, Vivek's eyes unreadable, Almalexia's expression a mask of sorrow, so the Sill lost in contemplation of mysteries only he could fathom. The air between the two leaders was thick with all that had been lost, trust, hope, and the fragile dream of unity. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was absolute, broken only by the distant rumble of the mountain and the faint, rhythmic thrum of Kagranak's machines echoing from the depths below. Dumac looked into Nerevar's eyes and saw the reflection of his own pain. They had been friends, once brothers in vision, if not in blood. Now, they stood on opposite sides of a chasm carved by fear and ambition. It was Nerevar who broke the silence, his voice low and steady. Dumac, this does not have to end in blood. Tell me the truth. What have your people done beneath the mountain? What power have you awakened? Dumac's reply was heavy with regret. We sought only to understand, to master what lies beneath. The heart is a mystery, Nerevar, a promise and a warning. Kagranak believes he can harness it, but I have tried to slow him, to urge caution. I never wished for this war. Nerevar's gaze hardened. The tribunal has seen visions, disaster, should the heart be disturbed. The Daedra whisper of Dil. My people fear what they do not understand, Dumac. And your secrecy has only fed that fear. A tremor shook the ground, sending a cascade of ash down the slope. The mountain seemed to groan in protest, as if the land itself sensed the weight of the moment. In the depths below, Kagranak's ritual reached its crescendo. The tonal tools, Keening, Sunder, and Wraithguard sang their impossible song, resonating with the heart's divine pulse. The boundary between mortal and God, between hope and hubris, thinned to a hair's breadth. Dumac stepped forward, his voice pleading. We can still stop this, Nerevar. Call off your warriors. Let us descend together and end the experiment before it is too late. There is still a path back from the break. But the tribunal intervened, their voices rising in a chorus of warning and accusation. Almalexia spoke of betrayal, of the Dwemer's pride and the danger they posed to all of Tamriel. Vivek's words were poetry edged with steel, lamenting the loss of friendship but insisting that the Chimer must act to protect their future. So Thasil, enigmatic as ever, merely watched, his eyes reflecting the flicker of distant fires. In that moment, trust shattered. Nerevar, torn between his love for Dumac and his duty to his people, made his choice. He drew his blade, its edge catching the dying light. If you will not stop this, Dumac, then I must. The betrayal was not in the drawing of the sword, but in the breaking of the bond that had once united them. Dumac's heart broke as he raised his own weapon, not in anger, but in sorrow. Their duel was swift and desperate, a clash of wills as much as steel. Each blow was a plea, each parry a memory of what might have been. Below, Cadranak struck the heart with his tools, and the world changed. A wave of power surged through the mountain, a cataclysmic force that swept through Dwemer and Chimer alike. The ground split, fire and light erupting from the depths. The Dwemer vanished, gone in an instant, their fate sealed by the very secret they had sought to master. On the summit, Dumac fell. Whether by Nerevar's hand or by the mountain's wrath, none can say. Nerevar knelt beside his fallen friend, his tears lost in the ash that swirled around them. The tribunal stood silent, the cost of victory heavy upon them. The betrayal at the summit was not a single act, but the culmination of every fear, every secret, every hope betrayed. It was the end of an age, the breaking of a dream, and the beginning of a legend that would haunt Tamriel for centuries to come. And as the fires of Red Mountain raged, the heart pulsed on, its secret now lost, its solemn dirge for a people vanished, and a friendship undone. The summit of Red Mountain trembled with the weight of destiny. Far below, the battle's echoes faded into a haunted silence, but within the mountain's heart, a different storm raged, a tempest of sound, magic, and ambition. Cadranak, high engineer of the Dwemer, stood before the Heart of Lorkhan, his hands steady as he raised the legendary tonal tools, Keening, Sunder, and Wraithguard. Around him, his most trusted disciples watched with awe and dread, their faces lit by the heart's impossible radiance. The chamber was alive with energy. The heart pulsed, each throb sending ripples of power through the stone, through the machines, through the very souls of those present. Cadranak's voice, steady and measured, chanted the final equations, the culmination of years of study and sacrifice. The tonal harmonics he summoned were not merely sound, but the secret language of creation itself, a song that could shape reality, bend the laws of Mundus, and perhaps, as he dreamed, raise the Dwemer to the level of gods. Outside, the mountain groaned. The sky was black with ash, and the ground shook as if in protest. Dumac and Nerevar, locked in their final, tragic confrontation, could not know what was unfolding in the depths below. Nor could the armies, Chimer and Dwemer alike, who clung to the slopes, battered and broken, waiting for a sign that would decide their fate. Cadranak struck the heart. The world changed. A wave of force, silent and absolute, swept outward from the chamber. It was not fire or wind, not light or shadow, but something deeper, a rewriting of the very fabric of existence. For a moment, every Dwemer in Tamriel felt it, a shudder in the soul, a note of music that resonated in the bones, the mind, the blood. In that instant, they stood on the threshold of divinity, their consciousnesses poised to transcend the mortal coil. But the heart was not a tool to be mastered. Its power was too vast, its purpose too ancient, its secrets too deep. The tonal harmonics, so carefully calculated, became a cacophony. The machine screamed as reality twisted, and the Dwemer, every man, woman, and child, were swept away, their bodies and souls unmoored from Mundus. Some say they became one with the heart, others that they vanished into a realm beyond mortal comprehension. The halls of their cities fell silent, their machines stilled, their wonders left to gather dust. Above, Red Mountain erupted. Fire and ash poured into the sky, blotting out the sun. The Chimer and the few surviving Dwemer were caught in the cataclysm, their fates forever altered by the hubris of those who had dared to touch the divine. The land itself was reshaped, the wounds of that day etched into the bones of Resdayn for all time. In the aftermath, the silence was total. The Dwemer were gone, their legacy reduced to ruins and riddles. The Chimer mourned their dead, and the tribunal, forever changed by what they had witnessed, began their own ascent to godhood. The Heart of Lorkhan, battered but unbroken, continued to pulse in the mountain's depths, a secret, a warning, a promise. The Tonal Cataclysm was not merely the end of a people, but the birth of a legend. In every whisper of wind through empty halls, in every glimmer of brass beneath the earth, the memory endures, the day the Dwemer vanished, and the world was forever changed. When the cataclysmic pulse of the Heart of Lorkhan faded, the world was left in a silence so profound it seemed to swallow all memory of what had come before. The slopes of Red Mountain, once alive with the clash of armies and the thunder of Dwemer machines, lay quiet beneath a shroud of drifting ash. The air, heavy with the scent of scorched stone and burnt metal, hung motionless as if the land itself mourned the passing of an age. In the aftermath, the silence was total. The Dwemer, who had filled the halls of their underground cities with debate, invention, and laughter, were simply gone. Their forges went cold, their automatons wandered aimlessly through empty corridors, and the great libraries stood undisturbed, their secrets gathering dust. The Chimer who survived the eruption moved through the ruins in awe and fear, searching for any sign of the vanished deep folk. But there were no bodies, no cries for help, only the echo of absence, as if the Dwemer had been plucked from the world in a single, impossible moment. Dumac Dwarfking, the last to bear the crown of the Dwemer, was nowhere to be found. Some whispered that he had fallen in battle, others that he had been taken by the Heart's power along with his people. Nerevar, standing amidst the devastation, felt the weight of both victory and loss. The tribunal, forever changed by what they had witnessed, kept their own counsel, their eyes reflecting the fire that still smoldered within the mountain. The silence stretched on, day after day, as the survivors of the battle struggled to make sense of what had occurred. The Chimer buried their dead and tended their wounded, their psalms of mourning drifting over the ashen fields. They spoke in hushed tones of the Dwemer's fate, of the price of ambition, and of the terrible power that still slumbered beneath Red Mountain. Some feared that the deep folk might return, others that their disappearance was a curse that would haunt the land forever. In the empty halls of the Dwemer, the silence became a presence in itself. The machines, deprived of their masters, continued their endless tasks, polishing floors, tending gardens, repairing broken pipes. Without guidance, their movements grew erratic, sometimes halting for days before resuming their routines. Scholars who ventured into these ruins reported a sense of being watched, of ancient eyes lingering in the shadows, and the constant, low hum of dormant power waiting to be awakened. The world outside Red Mountain felt the silence as well. News of the Dwemer's disappearance spread across Tamriel, carried by traders and travelers who brought tales of vanished cities and haunted ruins. Kings and emperors sent envoys to investigate, hoping to claim the lost treasures of the deep folk. Few returned, and those who did spoke of traps undisturbed for centuries, of guardians who would not rest, and of secrets best left buried. For the Chimer, the silence was both a wound and a warning. The tribunal, now ascendant, urged their people to look forward, to build a new future from the ashes of the old. Yet the memory of the Dwemer lingered in every stone, every artifact, every echoing corridor. The silence became a lesson, a reminder that even the greatest achievements could be undone by pride and the hunger for forbidden knowledge. And so, the silence endured. It settled over the ruins of Nchardak and Bamzamskind, over the empty forges in the abandoned halls, over the hearts of those who remembered what had been lost. It was a silence filled with questions, of where the Dwemer had gone, of what they had become, of whether they might one day return. But above all, it was a silence that marked the end of an era and the beginning of a legend that would haunt Tamriel for generations to come. In the centuries that followed, the silence would be broken only by the footsteps of those brave or foolish enough to seek the secrets of the deep folk. Yet even they, upon entering the shadowed halls and hearing the faint, mechanical heartbeat that lingered in the darkness, would pause and listen and remember the day when the world changed and the Dwemer vanished into silence. When the fury of Red Mountain finally subsided and the last echoes of the Tonal Cataclysm faded into memory, the land lay transformed beneath a blanket of gray. The slopes, once alive with the march of armies and the clangor of Dwemer machines, were now eerily still, as if the world itself paused to mourn. The ash fell in slow, ceaseless drifts, covering the scars of battle and the remnants of two great people's ambitions. The silence that followed was not merely the absence of sound, but a deep and abiding stillness, a hush that seemed to press upon every living thing, demanding remembrance and reflection. The Chimer who survived the eruption wandered the devastated landscape in a daze, their golden skin dulled by sit, their eyes haunted by visions of fire and loss. They moved through the ruins of their homes and temples, searching for loved ones, for meaning, for any sign that their world might be rebuilt. The devastation was total, villages buried beneath volcanic debris, fields rendered barren by poisonous ash, rivers choked with the detritus of war and disaster. The air itself tasted of sorrow and regret. In the days that followed, the survivors gathered in small, desperate bands. They shared stories of what they had witnessed, the vanishing of the Dwemer, the eruption's wrath, the moment when the world seemed to end and begin again in the same breath. Some wept openly, mourning not only the dead but the loss of certainty, the shattering of dreams that had once bound Chimer and Dwemer together. Others grew silent and withdrawn, their grief too deep for words. The tribunal, changed forever by the events at Red Mountain, moved among their people with new gravity. Vivek's voice, once filled with poetry and hope, now carried the weight of command. Almalexia's compassion was tempered by a resolve forged in fire, and Sotha Sil's eyes held secrets that none could fathom. They offered comfort where they could, tending to the wounded, organizing the rebuilding of homes and the purification of water and soil. Yet even they could not erase the memory of what had been lost, nor the knowledge that their own destinies had been altered by the heart's power. The land itself bore the marks of catastrophe. Forests were reduced to skeletal remains, their charred trunks reaching skyward in silent supplication. The once fertile ashlands became a wasteland, home to twisted forms of life that seemed to thrive on ruin. Strange flora emerged from the scorched earth, plants that glowed faintly in the moonlight, their roots drawing sustenance from the lingering magic of the heart. The rivers ran black for months, their waters tainted with volcanic residue and the sorrow of 1,000 lost souls. In the ruins of Dwemer cities, the silence was absolute. The great machines stood motionless, their gears frozen in place, their lights flickering and dying one by one. The halls that had once echoed with debate and invention were now mausoleums, haunted by the memory of a people who had vanished in an instant. Scholars and adventurers who dared to enter these depths found only dust and shadows, the secrets of the deep folk locked away behind doors that would never open again. Yet, even in the midst of devastation, life endured. The Chimer began to rebuild, drawing strength from their faith and the guidance of the tribunal. They cleared the ash from their fields, planted new crops, and raised new homes from the bones of the old. The memory of the Dwemer lingered in every artifact unearthed, every machine glimpsed through the haze, a reminder of what had been gained and lost in the pursuit of power. The ashen aftermath became a time of reckoning. Psalms were sung in memory of the fallen, and stories were told of the days before the mountain's wrath. The Chimer honored their dead with rituals and offerings, seeking to appease the spirits and ensure safe passage to the next world. The tribunal spoke of renewal, of a chance to forge a new identity from the ashes of the old. Yet beneath their words, a current of unease remained, a sense that the silence left by the Dwemer's disappearance was not merely an absence, but a wound that would never fully heal. And so, the people of Resdayn moved forward, one step at a time, through a landscape forever changed by fire and ambition. The ashen winds carried whispers of the past, and the shadow of Red Mountain loomed over every hope and fear. The world had been remade, But the memory of what was lost lingered in every drifting flake of ash, every silent ruin, every heart that still dared to dream. In the centuries after the Tonal Cataclysm, when the ash had settled and the world above Red Mountain began to heal, the deep places of the earth remained unchanged, silent, untouched, and haunted by memory. The Dwemer were gone, their fate a riddle whispered in the halls of scholars and the dreams of those who wandered too far into the ruins. Yet in the endless dark beneath Tamriel, the echo of their presence lingered, woven into the very stone and metal of their vanished civilization. The great cities of the Dwemer, Nchardak, Bam-Zanskend, Tardams, and countless others became mausoleums of ingenuity and ambition. Their halls, once alive with debate and invention, now stood in perpetual twilight, illuminated only by the faint glow of dormant machinery. Automatons, deprived of their masters, patrolled the corridors in endless, silent routines. The air was thick with the scent of oil and dust, and the only sounds were the distant clank of gears and the soft, ceaseless hum of tonal resonators, still vibrating with the last notes of a song that had ended in catastrophe. Adventurers and scholars from every corner of Tamriel were drawn to these ruins, compelled by the promise of lost knowledge and the hope of unraveling the mystery of the Dwemer's disappearance. Some sought treasure, others truth. Most returned with little more than tales of wonder and terror, of labyrinthine passages that seemed to shift and rearrange themselves, of guardians that watched with unblinking brass eyes, and of strange, haunting melodies that echoed through the stone, as if the city itself mourned its creators. A few, however, brought back artifacts, fragments of Dwemer craft, etched with runes that no living scholar could fully decipher. These relics became the subject of endless study, their secrets jealously guarded by mages and emperors alike. Yet for all their efforts, the heart of the Dwemer's mystery remained elusive. The deeper one delved, the more the ruins seemed to resist understanding, as if the deep folk themselves had woven a final, unbreakable riddle into the bones of their world. It was said that, in the deepest chambers, the echoes of the Dwemer could still be heard. Some claimed to have glimpsed ghostly figures moving through the gloom, shadows that vanished at the edge of sight, voices that spoke in languages long forgotten. Others reported dreams filled with visions of brass towers and endless halls, of a people who had touched the divine and been swept away by the consequences of their ambition. The Chimer, now transformed into the Dunmer by the mountain's wrath, remembered the Dwemer with a mixture of awe and bitterness. They told stories of the vanished deep folk, of the wonders they had built and the price they had paid for their pride. In the great houses and temples of Morrowind, the memory of the Dwemer was both a warning and an inspiration, a reminder that even the greatest achievements could be undone in a moment of hubris. Yet the echoes in the deep were not merely memories. The ruins themselves were alive with dormant power, waiting for a hand, wise or foolish, to awaken them. The tonal resonators, when struck with the right note, could still open doors or unleash hidden traps. The automatons, given the right command, could spring to life with deadly purpose. Some whispered that the Dwemer had not vanished at all, but had transcended the mortal plane, their spirits lingering in the machines and stones they had shaped. Others believed that, in some forgotten corner of the world, the deep folk still watched and waited, their silence more eloquent than any words. As the centuries passed, the echoes grew fainter but never disappeared. Each generation sent new seekers into the depths, some in search of glory, others driven by the simple need to understand. Few returned unchanged. The deep places of Tamriel held their secrets close, and those who listened carefully could still hear the faint, mournful song of a people lost to time. In this way, the legacy of the Dwemer endured, not in the empires they had built or the battles they had fought, but in the echoes that lingered in the deep, a testament to ambition, ingenuity, and the price of reaching for the divine. And so, beneath the mountains and the ash, the story of the Dwemer was never truly silenced. It waited, patient as the stone, for those who would dare to listen. In the centuries after the Dwemer vanished, the world above Red Mountain changed and moved on. Ash storms swept the land, empires rose and fell, and the memory of the deep folk faded into legend. But deep beneath the surface, in the endless corridors and vaults of brass and stone, something endured, a presence that neither time nor silence could erase. The machines of the Dwemer, left behind in the Cataclysm, became the last custodians of their creator's legacy. In the darkness, they continued their ancient routines, their gears turning with a patience that only metal could possess. Some patrolled the empty halls, their footsteps echoing through chambers where no living voice had spoken for centuries. Others tended to the forges and workshops, adjusting levers and valves, maintaining systems whose purpose had long since been forgotten by the world above. It was as if the machines themselves remembered. In the deepest reaches of Nchardak, the great library of the deep, a spider-like automaton glided silently along the stacks, its brass limbs delicately dusting the tomes and scrolls that lined the shelves. The knowledge of the Dwemer, encoded in runes and diagrams, slumbered in these volumes, waiting for a hand, any hand, to awaken it. The automaton paused at each shelf, its crystal eye flickering with faint blue light, as if searching for a sign that its masters might return. In the forges of Tardams, the great centurions stood motionless, their hulking forms shrouded in shadow. Yet, at regular intervals, they would stir to life, their engines hissing with steam and their eyes glowing with the memory of purpose. They would march to the empty foundries, inspecting the machinery, tightening bolts, and oiling gears. When their task was complete, they returned to their alcoves and waited, as they had waited for generations. Everywhere, the machines performed their duties with unwavering devotion. Some maintained the waterworks, ensuring that the lifeblood of the city continued to flow through pipes and cisterns. Others tended to the gardens and hydroponic chambers, nurturing plants that had outlived the hands that planted them. In the grand halls, clockwork musicians played silent symphonies, their instruments echoing with the memory of Dwemer celebrations long past. To the rare adventurer who braved the depths, these machines seemed almost alive. They responded to intruders with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, their movements precise and deliberate. Some defended the sanctity of their halls with deadly efficiency, while others watched from the shadows, recording every detail in memory banks that had not been accessed in centuries. Scholars who studied the ruins spoke of a strange intelligence that lingered in the machines, a remnant of Dwemer genius, perhaps, or something more mysterious. The tonal resonators, when struck with the proper note, would hum with a resonance that seemed to awaken the very walls. Doors opened and closed, lights flickered on and off, and the air was filled with the faint, haunting melody of the deep folk's lost art. Some whispered that the machines were more than mere automatons. They believed that the Dwemer, in their final moments, had poured something of themselves into their creations, a fragment of memory, a spark of consciousness, a longing for the world they had left behind. In the endless cycles of maintenance and routine, the machines kept alive the dream of their makers, holding vigil in the darkness for a return that would never come. There were stories, too, of machines that acted beyond their programming. A centurion that rescued a lost explorer from a collapsing tunnel, guiding them to safety before returning to its post. A spider bot that repaired a broken bridge, allowing a group of scholars to cross a chasm and glimpse wonders unseen for generations. These tales, rare and often dismissed as fancy, hinted at a deeper mystery, the possibility that the machines, in their own way, remembered not only their tasks, but the spirit of the Dwemer themselves. In the deepest vaults, where the heart's resonance still lingered, the machines gathered in silent assembly. They stood in circles around ancient altars and resonators, their eyes glowing in the darkness, as if awaiting a signal only they could hear. Some believed that they communed with the vanished Dwemer, receiving instructions from beyond the veil of time. Others thought they simply waited, patient as the stone, for the day when the world would be ready to understand the legacy they guarded. The machines of the Dwemer were more than relics of a lost age. They were the last witnesses to a civilization that had dared to reach for the divine, and the keepers of secrets that might one day change the world again. In their endless routines, their silent music, and their watchful eyes, they bore witness to the greatness and the tragedy of their creators. And so, in the darkness beneath Red Mountain, the machines remembered. They remembered the laughter and debate, the triumphs and the failures, the hope that had once filled the halls with light. They remembered Dumac Dwarfking, whose wisdom had guided a people to greatness, and whose loss had marked the end of an era. They remembered the dream of the Dwemer, a dream that, for all its hubris, still echoed in the deep, waiting for someone to listen. Deep beneath the scorched slopes of Red Mountain, where the world's heartbeat thudded in molten stone and the air shimmered with ancient power, the legacy of Kagrenak endured, not in flesh, but in music, memory, in the resonant hum of the machines he left behind. Kagrenak, High Engineer of the Dwemer, was more than a craftsman or a scholar. He was a tonal architect, one who believed that the universe itself was a song, and that, with the right tools and understanding, its melody could be rewritten. After the disappearance of the Dwemer, the ruins of their civilization became haunted by more than silence. Adventurers and scholars who braved the labyrinthine depths of Nchardak, Tardams, and the other great cities reported strange phenomena. A low, unending vibration in the stone, a series of notes that seemed to echo without source, and the eerie sensation that the walls themselves were listening. It was said that Kagrenak's greatest works were not the automatons or engines, but the harmonies he wove into the very bones of the earth, a secret music that lingered long after its composer vanished. The songs of Kagrenak were not songs in the mortal sense. They were patterns, vibrations, and frequencies, mathematical symphonies that shaped brass and crystal, that opened hidden doors and powered machines with no visible source of energy. To the uninitiated, these sounds were little more than background noise, the groaning of ancient pipes or the faint chime of a distant bell. But to those who listened with intent, who studied the runes and diagrams left behind, the songs revealed themselves as the key to the Dwemer's greatest mysteries. It was through these songs that Kagrenak sought to commune with the Heart of Lorkhan. He believed that by matching the heart's divine resonance, he could unlock its power, reshape the Dwemer, and perhaps even transcend the limits of mortality. The tonal tools, keening, sunder, and wraithguard, were his instruments, each designed to strike a different note in the cosmic chord. When the cataclysm came, it was not only a physical disaster, but a rupture in the world's music, a dissonance so profound that it swept the Dwemer from existence. Yet the songs did not die with their composer. In the ruins, tonal resonators still vibrated with half-remembered melodies, and the machines responded to certain notes as if awakening from a dream. Some scholars claim to have deciphered fragments of Kagrenak's music, using them to activate dormant automatons or open vaults sealed for millennia. Others spoke of visions and dreams, in which the High Engineer himself appeared, his voice a harmony of logic and longing, offering riddles in the language of sound. There were those who believed that the songs were more than mere echoes, that they were a message, a warning, or perhaps even a promise. In the deepest chambers, where the air was thick with the residue of ancient magics, the melodies grew stronger, weaving through the silence like threads of gold. Some who lingered too long in these places found themselves changed, their thoughts attuned to patterns and possibilities beyond mortal comprehension. The Dunmer, inheritors of the Ashen Land, remembered the songs of Kagrenak with a mixture of awe and dread. They told tales of the deep folk's hubris, of the music that had unmade a people, and of the dangers that still lurked in the ruins. Yet even they could not help but be drawn to the haunting beauty of the melodies, the sense that, somewhere in the endless halls, the High Engineer's spirit lingered, still searching for the perfect chord, the note that would bring harmony to a broken world. And so, the songs of Kagrenak endured. They echoed in the deep, in the turning of gears and the sigh of wind through empty corridors. They waited for those who would listen, who would risk everything to understand the music that shaped the fate of the Dwemer. In every vibration, every lingering note, the story of Kagrenak and his vanished people lived on, a song without end, echoing through the ages beneath the mountain shadow. In the deep and echoing places beneath Tamriel, where sunlight never reached and the world's surface was but a distant memory, the Dwemer dreamed. Even after their disappearance, that dream lingered, woven into the humming of tonal resonators, the silent vigilance of brass automatons, and the cryptic runes etched into stone and metal. The world above called it ambition, or hubris, or folly. But to the Dwemer, it was simply the next step in an endless journey, the pursuit of understanding, mastery, and transcendence. Long before the cataclysm at Red Mountain, The Dwemer's dream had taken root in the minds of their greatest thinkers and leaders. They looked upon the world not as a gift from gods, but as a puzzle to be solved, a psalm to be rewritten by those who could hear its secret harmonies. Where others saw fate, the Dwemer saw possibility. Where others worshipped, the Dwemer questioned. Their cities were monuments to this restless spirit, vast, intricate, and alive with the whirring of machines and the glow of arcane energies. At the heart of their dream was the belief that the limits of mortality could be overcome. Kagranak, the High Engineer, gave voice to this hope in his work with the Heart of Lorkhan. He believed that, by understanding the tonal architecture of the universe, the Dwemer could step beyond the boundaries of flesh and time. The tools he forged, Keening, Sunder, Wraithguard, were not merely instruments of power, but keys to a new existence. The dream was not to become gods, as the tribunal would later attempt, but to become something wholly new, beings of pure logic, unbound by the whims of the Edra and Daedra. This dream was not without its costs. The Dwemer's skepticism set them apart from their neighbors, and their relentless pursuit of knowledge bred both awe and suspicion. The Chimer, their closest kin and occasional allies, saw in the Dwemer's dream a threat to the natural order, a challenge to the gods themselves. Yet even as tension simmered, there were moments of wonder, joint expeditions, shared discoveries, and the fleeting hope that understanding might bridge the gulf between faith and reason. But the dream was always fragile, always shadowed by the dangers of its own ambition. The events at Red Mountain, the Tonal Cataclysm, were the final, tragic crescendo. In their attempt to reshape themselves, the Dwemer vanished from the world, leaving only their machines and mysteries behind. Some say they succeeded, stepping sideways into a new reality, their consciousnesses fused with the sound of the cosmos. Others believe they were undone by the very forces they sought to master, lost forever in the echo of their own creation. Yet their dream did not die. In the centuries that followed, echoes of the Dwemer's vision persisted. Scholars and adventurers who braved the ruins spoke of strange dreams and visions, of cities that shimmered with impossible light, of voices that spoke in harmonies rather than words. Some claimed that the Dwemer still watched from beyond the veil, their thoughts woven into the tonal fabric of the world. The machines they left behind, too, seemed to remember, responding to certain melodies, awakening to the touch of those who dared to dream as the Dwemer once had. In this way, the Dwemer's dream became a part of Tamriel itself, a challenge to those who would seek understanding, a warning to those who would reach too far, and an invitation to imagine what might lie beyond the known. It was a dream of freedom from fate, of mastery over the self and the world, and of the endless possibility that comes from asking, again and again, what if? And so, beneath the mountains and the ash, in the silence of empty halls and the music of turning gears, the Dwemer's dream endures, waiting for those with the courage to listen, to question, and to dream anew. Amidst the desolation left by the cataclysm that shattered the Dwemer, there lies a solitary relic, a crown, resting quietly in the ashes beneath Red Mountain. This crown, unlike any other, is not merely a symbol of power or kingship. It is a silent testament to a vanished era, a beacon of memory and mystery amidst the ruins. It gleams faintly, its brass and gold filigree etched with runes of ancient craft, untouched by time's corrosive hand, as if preserving the last breath of a people who dared to defy fate itself. The crown in the ashes is said to have belonged to Dumac Dwarfking, the last sovereign of the Dwemer. Unlike the crowns of mortal kings, it was forged not only to adorn but to command, a masterpiece of tonal architecture and Dwemer ingenuity. Embedded within its circlet are intricate mechanisms and resonators, designed to attune the wearer's mind to the secret harmonies of the universe. It was a crown of wisdom, of unity, and of the unyielding will to shape destiny. Legends speak of the crown's discovery long after the Dwemer vanished. Explorers and scholars, drawn by tales of lost cities and forgotten wonders, descended into the labyrinthine depths beneath Red Mountain. Many perished in the attempt, swallowed by traps, automatons, or the mountain's restless fury. Yet some returned, clutching fragments of the past, strange devices, cryptic texts, and at last, the crown itself, found resting in a vault untouched by ruin or flame. The crown's presence is a paradox. It is both a relic of an age ended and a promise of what might have been. To those who gaze upon it, the crown seems to pulse with a faint inner light, as though alive with the memories of its maker and wearer. Some claim that when held close, it whispers the lost songs of the Dwemer, melodies of creation and destruction woven into its very metal. Others say it carries the weight of Dumac's regrets, the sorrow of a king who saw his people vanish into silence. In the courts of Tamriel, the crown has become a symbol of mystery and power. Dunmer lords and imperial scholars alike debate its meaning, some seeing it as a key to the Dwemer's secrets, others as a warning against the hubris that doomed them. The crown has inspired tales of kingship and ruin, of ambition and downfall, echoing the very story of the Dwemer's rise and fall. Yet the crown's true power remains hidden. It is said that only one attuned to the tonal harmonies of the Dwemer could unlock its mysteries, that without understanding the ancient language of sound and stone, the crown is but a beautiful artifact, silent, inert, waiting for the right hand to awaken it. Many have tried, but none have succeeded, their efforts ending in frustration or madness. The crown in the ashes also stands as a silent guardian over the ruins, a reminder that even in destruction, there is legacy. It watches over the empty halls and dormant machines, a last spark of the Dwemer's indomitable spirit. To some, it is a beacon of hope, that the Dwemer's dream might yet be rekindled, that their knowledge and wisdom could one day return to guide Tamriel once more. In the quiet moments beneath the mountain, when the ash drifts softly and the machines hum their ancient songs, the crown waits. It waits for the one who can hear the music beneath the silence, who can grasp the threads of a lost civilization and weave them into a new future. Until then, it rests in the ashes, a crown not merely of gold and brass, but of memory, mystery, and the enduring dream of a people who reached for the stars and vanished into legend. When the fires of Red Mountain faded and the world was left to reckon with the silence of the vanished Dwemer, the story of their fate did not simply vanish into the depths. Above the ashen slopes, in the empty halls, new powers and old eyes turned their gaze to the scarred land. The watchers above, those who survived, those who ascended, and those forever changed, became the keepers of memory and warning, their vigilance shaping the centuries that followed. In the wake of the cataclysm, the tribunal emerged as the new stewards of the Chimer, soon to be known as the Dunmer. Vivek, Almalexia, and Sothasil, each transformed by their contact with the Heart of Lorkhan, stood as living gods among their people. Their eyes, once mortal, now shimmer with knowledge both wondrous and terrible. They looked upon the ruins of the Dwemer with a mixture of awe, envy, and caution. The tribunal understood, perhaps better than any, the cost of reaching for forbidden power. Their own ascent was a mirror, a warning, and a temptation all at once. Vivek, poet and warrior, often spoke in riddles of the vanished deep folk. He wandered the halls of memory and prophecy, weaving the fate of the Dwemer into the tapestry of Dunmer identity. Almalexia, mother and queen, taught her people to mourn and to rebuild, urging them to remember the lessons of pride and loss. Sothasil, ever the tinkerer and sage, retreated into his clockwork world, seeking in the silence of machines the answers that had eluded even the Dwemer. Each of the tribunal, in their own way, became a watcher, guarding not only their people, but the dangerous knowledge that still slumbered beneath Red Mountain. Yet the tribunal were not the only watchers. Across Tamriel, scholars, mages, and rulers sent their agents to the ruins, hoping to plunder the secrets of the Dwemer. Some sought power, others understanding, but all were drawn by the mystery of a people who had touched the divine and vanished. The ruins became places of pilgrimage and peril, their silent halls echoing with the footsteps of those who had claimed the legacy of the deep folk. Many never returned, and those who did spoke of traps, automatons, and a presence that seemed to watch from the shadows, an intelligence not quite gone, not quite alive. Above all, the Dunmer themselves became the primary watchers of the Dwemer's legacy. The memory of Dumac and the vanished deep folk was woven into their songs, their rituals, and their very sense of self. The tribunal's teachings cautioned against the hubris that had led to the cataclysm, but also honored the ingenuity and ambition that had once united Chimer and Dwemer. The Dunmer built their cities atop the bones of the old, their temples rising from the ashes, their faith shaped by the memory of what had been lost. Some believed that the Dwemer themselves washed from beyond the veil, their spirits lingering in the machines and the music of the deep. There were tales of visions and dreams, of brass-eyed figures glimpsed in the darkness, of voices that whispered warnings and riddles. The machines, too, seemed to remember, their routines shifting in subtle ways, as if responding to the gaze of unseen masters. Even the land itself became a watcher. Red Mountain loomed over all, its shadow a constant reminder of the price of ambition. The ash that drifted down from its peak carried the memory of the cataclysm, settling on the fields and the cities, nourishing new life even as it smothered the old. The mountain watched in silence, its fires banked but never extinguished, waiting for the day when the cycle might begin anew. In time, the watchers above, gods, mortals, and the land itself, became the guardians of the Dwemer's story. They kept the memory alive, not only as a warning, but as a challenge, to dream, to build, to reach for the stars, but never to forget the cost. The vanished king's crown, the silent machines, the psalms that echoed in the deep, all were watched over, preserved in the hope that one day, wisdom and ambition might walk together, and the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. And so, above the ashes and the silence, the watchers kept their vigil, eyes turned always to Red Mountain, where history and possibility lay entwined, waiting for the world to remember. Long after the fires of Red Mountain faded and the world above returned to the rhythms of seasons and empires, the legacy of Dumac Dwarfking, the last king of the Dwemer, echoed through the halls of history like a distant, haunting melody. His name, once spoken with pride and reverence in the deep cities of Resdayn, became a whisper on the lips of scholars, a riddle for adventurers, and a sorrowful refrain in the songs of the Dunmer. Yet Dumac's legacy was not merely a tale of loss. It was a living thread, woven through the fabric of Tamriel, binding past, present, and future in ways both seen and unseen. The memory in stone and song. The first and most enduring testament to Dumac's legacy lay in the very stones of the Dwemer ruins that dotted Morrowind and beyond. Every corridor, every arch, every machine humming in the darkness was a silent tribute to a king who had believed in the power of unity, reason, and vision. The machines still moved with purpose, the tonal resonators still sang their secret harmonies, and the halls still bore the marks of a civilization that had dared to dream beyond the limits of mortality. To the Dunmer, Dumac's legacy was bittersweet. He was remembered as both friend and rival, a king who had once stood beside Nerevar, forging the pact of stone and ash, dreaming of a land where Chimer and Dwemer might prosper together. In the centuries that followed, his story became a parable, a warning against pride, a lament for lost friendship, and a symbol of what might have been. In the great houses and temples of Morrowind, his name was invoked in ritual and song, a reminder that even the greatest hopes could be undone by fear and ambition. The crown in the dream. The legendary crown in the ashes, said to have been Dumac's own, became an artifact of mythic significance. Some claimed it still rested in the deepest vaults beneath Red Mountain, waiting for a worthy hand to claim it. Others believed it had been scattered, its pieces lost to time, its power dormant but undiminished. To those who sought it, the crown was more than a relic. It was a symbol of the Dwemer's indomitable spirit, a promise that their wisdom and courage had not been entirely lost. For scholars and seekers, Dumac's legacy was a challenge. The mysteries of the Dwemer, encoded in runes and machines, beckoned to those who would dare to unravel them. The king's vision of a world shaped by knowledge and understanding inspired generations of mages, engineers, and philosophers. Some saw in his example the courage to question, to innovate, to strive for greatness even in the face of uncertainty. The lessons of the last king. But perhaps Dumac's greatest legacy was the lesson he left for those who came after. His life and reign were marked by choices that shaped the fate of his people, for better and for worse. He had chosen to trust, to build bridges, to seek peace even when war seemed inevitable. He had chosen to pursue knowledge, to embrace the unknown, to risk everything for the hope of something greater. And in the end, he had chosen to stand by his people, even as the world crumbled around him. The silence that followed the Dwemer's disappearance was not an ending, but an invitation. It called to those who would remember, who would listen, who would learn. The empty halls and silent machines were not merely tombs, but classrooms, places where the curious and the brave could discover the truths that Dumac and his people had sought. In every echo and every shadow, the last king's legacy endured. The Watchers and the world. Above the ruins, the Watchers kept their vigil. The tribunal, forever changed by the events at Red Mountain, shaped the destiny of the Dunmer, their own ascent a reflection of the Dwemer's vanished dream. Scholars and adventurers, drawn by the mystery of the deep folk, journeyed into the depths, hoping to claim a piece of Dumac's wisdom for themselves. And the machines, patient and tireless, continued their endless routines, their gears turning in memory of a king who had once believed that even the greatest mysteries could be solved. The enduring dream. In the end, Dumac's legacy was not a crown, a machine, or a city. It was a dream of unity, of understanding, of reaching beyond the boundaries of the known. It was a dream that survived in the hearts of those who remembered, who questioned, who dared to hope. And as long as the ruins stood, as long as the machines hummed in the darkness, as long as a single soul wondered what had become of the last king and his people, that dream would never die. So the story of Dumac Dwarfking, the last king of the Dwemer, lived on, etched in stone, sung in the deep, and whispered in the silence that followed. His legacy was not merely the memory of what was lost, but the promise of what might yet be found, by those with the courage to seek, to listen, and to dream anew.